What's going on, everybody? Eric Lindquist at Stokastic here on the Odd Chopper channel, coming to you with my 3 favorite prize picks for the Sunday main slate of games. I'm actually going to throw in one game from London, so letting you know that. One play from London, that's for sure, but then the other 2 from the Sunday main slate. Hit that like button, subscribe button, and notification bell as we get going here. Feel really good about this slate. I'm looking forward to it from a DFS perspective, and the best place to do that is at Prize Picks. You're playing player props, more or less. You can do it across multiple sports, not just NFL, but you can involve the MLB playoffs. You can invite NBA preseason into your life, esports, no matter what it is, they can offer it up for you over at Prize Picks. And yeah, let's just get to it, shall we? Make sure you get $100 first match deposit bonus. That's what's up in that corner that way. $100 first match deposit bonus. If you deposit 25, you'll get 25. Deposit 100, get 100. Use promo code Stokastic when you do that. Stokastic. Look at that. I can spell. Let's do this, shall we? First play, A.J. Dillon over 53.5 rushing yards. This is too low. This is way, way, way too low. We're looking at A.J. Dillon last week, and I know that he's starting, he's like the perfect timeshare with Aaron Jones. It's almost 50% down the middle. They've been playing some snaps together. That's why you see like 60% of the snaps for Aaron Jones, 58% for when A.J. Dillon. Not a lot of passing, or not a lot of running situations when you have 2 running backs out there. But A.J. Dillon, 53.5 rushing yards. Where do they get this number from? Because for me, I'm looking at a Giants team that's 28th in terms of rushing yards given up, 141 per game. If you just cut that in half, because these are the 2 guys running the football, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, they do some swing around stuff where Christian Watson can get a handoff and have like one jet sweep or something like that. But almost rarely, that's not a real thing. Never have I ever seen a lot of running back plays that aren't Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon here from the Green Bay Packers in the course of the last 2 years, because they're the only 2 running backs there. Just saying. A.J. Dillon, 53.5 rushing yards. He just went over that number pretty easily against New England. I don't see this Giants defense being all that imposing. One of the more outlier 3-1 starts, I think, on the board. I don't think a lot of people would disagree with that. But A.J. Dillon, 53.5 rushing yards. Aaron Jones, I don't mind as well putting that into a couple cards, but A.J. Dillon is my priority here. Give me more on a number where he's going to run amok on them. So enjoy that London play. We continue on to receiving yards. I'm just going to type it in because otherwise I'm going to have to scroll down forever, over more than 38.5 receiving yards for Rondale Moore. If you saw him play college football at Purdue, you know the kind of explosive playmaking he has. As a rookie last season, we saw it in week 2 where he just set the world on fire against Minnesota, my Minnesota Vikings, of course. He had to blow them up for 8 targets, 7 receptions, 114 yards, and a touchdown, a tutty to throw it in there. And then the rest of the field just chased him the entire season in DFS. His props were set really, really high, took a lot of unders because he wasn't seeing a lot of offensive snaps. In fact, he only saw more than 80% of snaps once. He only saw more than 60% of snaps twice. Every other game on the board, I mean, he missed a couple with injury there, 15, 16, 17, came back in the playoffs, only played 38% of the offensive snaps in that loss to the Rams. They got walloped by the Rams, in fact, and Kyler Murray, they questioned whether they should pay him or not. Still, jury's out on that one. They did. But we're looking at 86% of the snaps here, first game back. He made his debut here in week 4. Rondale Moore, if you're giving me 86% of the snaps on a guy this explosive, I don't care that he just had 11 yards. I don't care that he only saw 3 catches, 5 targets. He's going to make this work, even against a Philadelphia defense that's looked pretty darn good. And one of the reasons I feel really good about it, how bad is the Arizona defense? 4th worst DVOA defense. Shout out to our boy Chris Spags, Football Insiders. But you're going to be in a game where you're in come from behind mode, short ADOT situations. Rondale Moore is going to be running after the catch quite a bit here to try to make things happen for this Arizona Cardinals offense. Makes all the sense in all the land. I have him projected way north of 45 yards here, 52.5 receiving yards, according to that snap share, looking at what happened a lot last year. Plus, I mean, still no DeAndre Hopkins in this situation for Rondale Moore. So he will be the number 2. I imagine he's going to get more involved. Zach Ertz is obviously there from the post-deadline last season, and that'll factor in a little bit. But Rondale Moore, this is too low. Cool. That's not play number 2. But my favorite play on the board, and I think I recommend this every week because I like winning money, and you should too. Why is Cooper Kupp at 94.5 receiving yards again? Why do the lines just get set up here? I don't care what you think about Dallas's defense. I mean, we saw San Francisco's defense get after the quarterback last week, and you know what happened? Cooper Kupp got targeted 19 freaking times. 14 catches, way north of 100 yards. This just makes no sense to me. Over the course of last season, yes, 2021, where he had a better receiving core. He had Robert Woods. He had, at the tail end of that season, Odell Beckham Jr., Van Jefferson throughout. He failed to eclipse 94 yards just twice. Just twice. Again, we're looking for him to eclipse that 94.5. We're looking for 95 plus just twice. He had a streak of over 94 yards, this cutoff number. He was over 94 yards in 18 straight games until week 3 of this season. Going back to them counting the playoffs too. That's a ridiculous amount of yardage. Matt Stafford doesn't have another option. He has Higbee, who for whatever reason is just a target monster at the moment too. But Cooper Kupp is your only wide receiver. Allen Robinson is dust. Ben Skowronek, shout out Notre Dame. But like Cooper Kupp, he is at 94.5 receiving yards, regardless of what you think about this Cowboys defense. I do think they bounce back. I do think the Rams really put up a good showing, and it starts with their guy, Cooper Kupp. So those are my 3 favorite plays for the Prize Picks board on Sunday. We've got A.J. Dillon, over 53.5 rushing yards. Rondale Moore, more than 38.5 for more. How many times can I?
What is going on, everybody? It is time for another NFL tournament strategy show. Neil and I breaking down the Sunday main slate games. No more of this nonsense on primetime. We're not talking about these terrible showdown slates where it's all kickers and all defenses being optimal, but it's all good. We've got 12 games, so surely a few of them have to be good. And I actually do like this slate quite a bit. I built lineups up ahead of time. I feel really prepared and ready to talk about this slate, Neil. So I'm excited to chop it up with you. While you guys come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Shout out to Prize Picks, the sponsor of today's show. Neil, how are you doing? And how much did you enjoy that Thursday night football game?
It was really fun, Greg. I loved that game. We were all live until like the fourth quarter. You know, if all of your lineups are live until the fourth quarter, that's a good feeling. No, that was the most boring game I've ever watched. That was ugly. I don't really always hate ugly football, but that game was just not that fun to watch for me.
Here's the thing. Here's something that I'm confused by. How did people watch that game with no money invested in it? Like, people just sat and watched that for entertainment. If they hadn't bet on it, they had no fantasy lineups. They're just watching like, this is good entertainment on a Thursday night. Like, people were aggrieved it went to overtime. They're like, oh no, I have to watch more of this. No, you don't have to. You can walk away. You do something else. But there's this weird cultural thing where I think people are committed to watching all of the football games. That was a bad one. And then also, my showdown line, especially the thing that made it even worse is like, I had a bunch of Nyheim Hines. I assumed you did as well. He gets hurt on the first series of the game. Like, oh no, this is already going poorly. And it couldn't have really gone worse from there, but it didn't get better either.
I will say it was cool to see a solo winner. I love seeing that. Guy left like 18,000 on the table, something like that, and solo shipped the millie. So I do love seeing that sometimes. So that was cool. I just obviously I wish it had been me or at least like somebody who watches our content. It was some other guy.
Yeah, and so I know for me personally as well, there's some people that put out content. They're like, I like when my subscribers win more than I do. It's like, I call bullshit on that.
No,
like,
that's not cool.
Yeah, if you guys are watching you win, I love seeing it, but I would still prefer that I am the one who won. Yeah. Like, there's nothing new where it's like, oh, I might have lost all my money on this slate, but somebody won $1 million. No, I still want to win. I would have wanted to see Nyheim Hines play more than 3 plays in that entire game. But we've got a slate to talk about for today. And I did have one just general overarching strategy question for you, because I actually did really well on last weekend's slate, Neil. And a lot of it had to do with the weather. And I want to know how often you will factor in weather in some of these games, which I don't think it's going to be a massive factor this week. But I know for me, I had two sets of lineups that I built last Sunday, and I was looking at both of them. And one was just kind of using projections as is in our data. And another one where I was like, should I just be looking at some of these shitty weather games where it has a lot of chalky players like the Ravens Bills game? And do I just want to really take not totally fade them, but I ended up going really light on that on the Ravens Bills game and the Eagles Jaguars game just because of weather. And that ultimately ended up being something that really played well for me because then I ended up on a lot of Geno Smith and Jared Goff. So it was worse players, but in better weather situations. How much would you consider weather on Sunday morning when it starts to look worse?
Yeah, so honestly, it's not something that I factor in a whole lot, except for rare circumstances where it's going to be like 30-mile-per-hour winds or higher than that. Maybe it could be a spot that I'm missing out by not factoring in weather. My assumption generally is that is factored into the lines of the games. The Vegas lines factor in weather, so then the projections also factor in weather. So it's not something that I don't want to double factor it in, but it can be a factor in terms of how the team is going to play the game. So maybe a team, we saw the Patriots last year rush every single time because it was too windy to throw the ball. So it is a factor for sure, and probably something that I should be factoring in more in general. But this weekend, I'm looking at the weather reports. I'm not really seeing any major cause for concern.
Yeah, and the thing for me was it was the weather report getting worse and the ownership getting higher on that game on Sunday morning. I was like, this seems inversely correlated. And that was why I had the two different CSVs. I was like, the weather one, that's literally what I labeled them on my desktop, weather, non-weather. Nice. And I was going like, all right, we're factoring the weather, went with it. And it did end up working out. But I was kind of curious how much you look at the weather. But like you said, it's not going to be a factor as much for this slate. We have better weather, a little bit colder across the country, but in general, nothing crazy in terms of torrential winds or rain or anything like that. But let's start by talking about the quarterback position. And there's a couple of guys that are popular this week, picking up double-digit ownership across DK and FanDuel, Josh Allen and Tom Brady. So first, I want to start by talking about Josh Allen. He's expensive. He's projected for right around a 12% ownership on both DraftKings and FanDuel, but also in our top stacks tool. By far, the team with the best odds being the top stack, while also having really high top value odds. How high of a priority is stacking the Bills up going to be for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a priority. The Bills look very good in the tools. We have Josh Allen projected for 12.3% ownership. They are the top stack on the board at nearly 20% top stack odds. So the Bills look really good. Josh Allen, obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the league, one of the best receiving cores in the league. Love throwing some Isaiah McKenzie out there. The bigger question for me is, do we run it back with a Pittsburgh player in this game? That's the hardest decision I think we have to make around the Bills this weekend. And I think for the most part, I'm going to, but I'm probably not going to in every lineup. Probably not going to force it in all of my lineups to do a run back with Bills. But man, it's if they're going to put up a lot of points, if Josh Allen's going to be throwing it in the fourth quarter, that's probably because the Steelers are putting up some points too. So you might need to run it back. You definitely, they have better odds of putting up a big score if Pittsburgh does put up some points, but I might still run some out without Pittsburgh and just hope that the Bills can put up 40 points in 3 quarters.
I've not made any lineups that have not had a run back stack yet. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. I said the start of the week, we don't really know which teams are good or bad. We have ideas, but oftentimes teams end up being way different than we expected coming into the seasons. This might be one of those spots where I am willing to run Josh Allen out there with a couple of his pass catchers and not a Pittsburgh player on the other side, because to be honest, I thought Pickett looked fairly terrible last week. He threw a few interceptions. For sure, I think the Bills could get up big and it could lead to garbage time where there's easier plays to be made downfield, but who even knows if the starters would be in at that point? Like, I'm sure Pickett's still going to be in as a quarterback, but this could be the first spot that I'm really willing to do it without a run back stack. And right now, Josh Allen does look like the top overall quarterback play by all the different tools we have on the site. Highest optimal odds in the boom bust tool. The top stack odds have the Bills as the best stack team, but by far, like, there isn't really even a close second. They've got like double the odds of every other team. So it's going to be hard for me to stay away from Buffalo, but I don't think I'm going to want to force Pittsburgh players coming back on the other end in all those lineups. So I think, to me, Josh Allen probably ends up being my highest owned quarterback of the week. Is that how it's looking for you as well?
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance that Josh Allen ends up being my top quarterback. Hard to say at this point because I haven't built lineups out yet. But it's obviously one of the top spots on the slate. Really, that concern with the run back and whether Pittsburgh is going to be able to put up any points is my biggest drawback on the Bills stacks. But I'm probably going to have plenty.
Yeah, and then the other quarterback here and this is where things are going to deviate a little bit across DraftKings and FanDuel because Josh Allen is popular on both DK and FanDuel. Actually, I think I misspoke before because I was looking at the DraftKings ownership twice. Josh Allen's actually around 20% owned over on FanDuel, and then it's the 12% number over on DK. But now we have to talk about Tom Brady, who's going to be popular as a value option, both DraftKings and FanDuel, right around 12% ownership on FanDuel. DK is coming in at 13% owned, so actually it's slightly more popular than Josh Allen as far as DraftKings is concerned. I'm a little conflicted with Tom Brady, which is also I wanted to talk to you about this because Tom Brady individually looks overowned for us, right? Like he looks a little bit too popular. The Buccaneers look a little bit too popular as far as a stack is concerned. But when I was running lineups this morning, I was still getting to a lot of him anyway because I like so many of the other options in the game, like Chris Godwin. I think is one of the best wide receiver plays on this slate. We also got Drake London without Kyle Pitts. Not that Kyle Pitts had a whole bunch of targets going to him before. We know about that, but it's even less competition for targets for Drake London now. Leonard Fournette, I think, is one of the best running backs on the slate. So I was getting to a lot of Tom Brady just because the way I set up rules for stacking is like the only way to just jam a bunch of players from one game is if I have one of the quarterbacks on one of the either sides. So I ended up getting to Tom Brady probably more than I was expecting. So I wanted to ask you, number one, what do you think of Tom Brady as a play? And then individually, if you don't love a quarterback, but you just like all of the other options in the game, will that also influence you to end up getting more of that quarterback anyway?
Yeah, it will. If I really like the receivers, I'm probably going to like the quarterback more just because, we're stacking the quarterback here. So I think it makes sense. If you really like Chris Godwin, Russell Gage looks great in the tools. Also, he is now questionable. So we'll see how that pans out. But if Russell Gage is out, insert new player for the Bucks. Kate Otten is sort of interesting at tight end. So yes, Tom Brady looks great going up against the Falcons, one of the worst defenses in the league, 17th against the pass, 26th against the rush. So it's a great spot for Tom Brady. The Bucks have a 28.25 implied total, one of the highest on the slate. So there's plenty to like about Tom Brady. The only thing that we don't like really is that ownership, projected for 13.4% ownership with an 8.1% chance of being the top stack on the board. It's hard to really get behind that too much. I'm probably going to be under the field on Tom Brady and maybe play some of those receivers as one-offs and just hope the volume goes to one receiver. But I understand why people want to play Tom Brady against the Falcons. It is another spot where we have to consider, if you do play Tom Brady, do you run it back with a Falcons player? Do you run it back with Drake London or, I don't know, Tyler Algier or somebody from the Falcons and hope that they put up some points? And that's tough because the Bucks have a pretty good defense.
Yeah, so Drake London is I guess I don't know if we'd consider him to be like straight up value, but at 5,900, he's one of my most rostered mid-range wide receivers. And then as far as cheap running backs go, there's still some news we need to hear on guys who are in or out, but Algier's also a value play I like with Cordarrelle Patterson being on the injured list. So that is something else that did influence me getting to more of Brady when I was running my crunches, is that there are run back options that I do really like here. Whereas we were talking about the Bills before with Josh Allen, it's hard for me to feel good about any of the Pittsburgh run back options because number one, I don't know how good Pickett is as a quarterback right now. He didn't look particularly great last week. And then also he has a lot of guys to throw to that are in the mix. Like there's Pickens, there's Claypool, there's Deontay Johnson. So that also makes it hard to know who would be the guy that's the preferred option. From the Falcons standpoint, I'm pretty sure the best run back is either Algier or London. So I think it makes for a good game stack overall.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It is tough with Pittsburgh. George Pickens looking a little bit more interesting this week with Pickett at quarterback. Deontay Johnson, obviously, you can always play Deontay Johnson. Chase Claypool hasn't done much. He was a call that Chris Baggs liked on the contrary yesterday. He was into the idea of playing some Claypool at very low ownership. So there are plenty of run back options. And then, of course, the Muth for Pittsburgh. Plenty of run back options for Pittsburgh, and it's hard to really pinpoint which one you want to play. Whereas, like you said, Atlanta is really more condensed in terms of playable options. So maybe that does make me like Tom Brady a little bit more.
Super chat from Teddy Wayman. What's up, guys? Nothing better to start my 30th birthday than listening to the strategy show and drinking beers. Cheers. Well, first, Teddy, happy birthday. And also a special shout out because somebody mentioned in the chat, yes, it is Eric Lindquist's birthday again. I know people ask, how is he so old? Because people can't believe how old Eric is. It's something that blows people's minds. It's because it's his birthday every 3-4 months, and you just age a lot quicker when you have birthdays that often. But Teddy, congratulations on turning 30. You've made it. I do think it's funny when people say congratulations when you turn 30. It's like, it wasn't that accomplishment. Like, I just existed. Like, oh, really? You managed to survive for 30 years? Yeah, I was able to do it. But
It
happy
used to be an
birthday, Teddy.
accomplishment.
Yeah. But for some people, yeah, maybe. To me, it was like I kind of expected this to come. It seemed like I remember people getting really excited when I graduated middle school. It's like how little do you think of me? Like, we're this excited I made it through 8th grade. This is it was like cool. I did some division on a calculator. It wasn't all that difficult.
Eddie, I'm curious where you're located, that you're drinking at. It's noon here, which I guess is fine. You know, nothing wrong with a little day drinking. But I wonder, if are you on the West Coast just drinking super early? You said you're starting the day here. I hope you're enjoying it.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Teddy. Happy birthday. Let's talk about some of the other quarterbacks, and one just FanDuel specific I wanted to ask you about. Probably my least favorite quarterback play over on FanDuel. I know Jalen Hurts has been absolutely terrific to start the year, but he's projected for north of 20% ownership over on FanDuel. That's a tough number for me to swallow, because if you're paying up the quarterback, you've also got Josh Allen there. And for reference, we've got Josh Allen optimal 21% of the time compared to 11% of the time for Jalen Hurts. And then also looking at our top stacks tool over on FanDuel, we've got Buffalo as the top stack 20% of the time, only 9% for Philly. It doesn't feel great to go underweight or just not really have a lot of Jalen Hurts. But relative to his ownership, I just don't think he's a very strong play over on FanDuel.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I was going to bring up Jalen Hurts as a quarterback that I love this week, one of my favorite quarterbacks on the week, but that is on DraftKings. On FanDuel, it is a different story with that 20% ownership. Makes it a little bit tough. I would have a hard time full fading Hurts in 150 lineups, just because it's such a great spot for Hurts and he's been so good this year. But at 20% ownership, I'm guessing I'll be under the field.
Yeah, and let's see. So I did run lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel this morning. I ended up coming away with 6% of Jalen Hurts on FanDuel. So once again, not an outright fade, but that's so much less than what the field has at this moment. It would just be hard for me to get north of that 20% number on him. But like we said, it's a different slate, DraftKings and FanDuel, where you've got a player like Jalen Hurts is very popular on FanDuel. And then on DK, it's not to say he's unowned, but it's single digit ownership on him. So it's a much different outlook when he has a third of the ownership as far as DK goes. It seems you do like Jalen Hurts quite a bit on the DraftKings slate. So what is it that you like about him and the Eagles?
I mean, it's the spot against the Cardinals. The Cardinals are 28th in terms of pass DVOA per fantasy for football outsiders. The Eagles have a 27 point implied team total. Just a great spot for Jalen Hurts overall. And then, of course, you know, he's just been great. He's been running so much this year, puts up fantasy points in so many different ways against a weak team in the Cardinals. It's just really hard not to like Jalen Hurts in this matchup. And the Cardinals are also, you know, because they have a decent offense, at least in theory, the Cardinals have a 21.5 implied team total. So it's different than the Bills, for example, in that most likely Jalen Hurts is still going to have to be playing hard in the fourth quarter. And it's easy to run it back with a Cardinals receiver that you like. So there's just a lot to like about the Eagles, particularly on DraftKings, where he's getting under 10% projected ownership. Jalen Hurts looks great.
Yeah. So those are, to me, a lot of the key talking points at quarterback. But I also want to know, because a lot of the quarterbacks we talk, you know, Brady's fairly cheap, but Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, those are expensive QBs. Are there any cheap value options or punt plays that we really like getting to a quarterback for week 5?
Yeah, I mean, just let me say real quick, I kind of like Kyler Murray this week because he rushed 12 times last week in that same matchup where it's a tough defense for the Eagles, but they're probably going to need to be throwing to keep up with the Eagles. So I do like Kyler Murray at a discount at 7,400, kind of interesting. Justin Herbert also pretty interesting to me. Where are we drawing the line for a cheap punt?
Let's just say anything south of Tom Brady. So the 6K mark on DK, or then, you know, like FanDuel sub 7,800. So that'll kind of be the barometer.
Okay, I think both the quarterbacks in the Titans Commanders game are sort of interesting to me, just because both defenses are so bad against the pass. It could really shoot out. So that's Ryan Tannehill and Carson Wentz, both sort of interesting to me. They don't have really high implied team totals. The Titans at 22.25, Commanders at 20.75. But I think that's a game that at least has potential to shoot out with those bad defenses. We've got Tannehill at only 1.8% projected ownership with a 4.3% chance of being optimal, 3.2% chance of booming. Positive leverage on Tannehill, and then Wentz 2.3% projected ownership, 2.6% optimal, 3.4% boom. So we have positive leverage on both of these quarterbacks in a game that I just think could really shoot out. So that kind of interests me. going to have some interest in Trevor Lawrence at 5,600. Easy to pair him with Christian Kirk. We do have him at 9% ownership, which looks like a little bit too high relative to his odds of success, but I still like Trevor Lawrence in a matchup with the Texans. It's just one of the best matchups you can have. Maybe gain some confidence against this team that is not great. They can pick up a win. 25.25 implied team total for the Jaguars. Trevor can run a little bit, and of course, they can pass through the air against the Texans. So I kind of like Trevor Lawrence as well. Let me see if I can think of any other super cheaper options that we really like. I sort of have interest in Justin Fields this week, just sort of a gut thing. He has been terrible this year, but the Vikings defense is not a good defense. So I think that Justin Fields, if he's ever going to get it done, it would be against this Vikings defense. 20th in terms of pass DVOA. 20th in terms of pass DVOA, 27th in terms of rush DVOA. Justin Fields could start running on these Vikings. And, they only have an 18.25 implied team total. So the Bears not expected to put up a ton of points, but I think this is a matchup where he could kind of surprise us.
Yeah, and then I totally agree with that, by the way. I got well overweight to Trevor Lawrence in my runs on both FanDuel and DraftKings just because of the game environment and the pass catchers. I've rostered a lot of Christian Kirk this year, and also just the pricing there is pretty favorable across the board. Teddy Bridgewater. It's a weird spot because we need to get more updates on Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. They're both listed as questionable. It seems like they're going to play, though. It just seems like they're listed as questionable because based on some of the NFL rules, the protocols, when players are kind of banged up, they're supposed to be listed as questionable. And I think the Dolphins are scared shitless to make any more mistakes when it comes to injury reporting. So I'm not really all that concerned with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle's actual availability. Although, once again, we do need official word on that. So keep an eye on any of that. But Teddy Bridgewater, I think he's going to throw the ball a lot this week because we saw that when he came in for Tua last week. And I know that Bridgewater didn't look great, but he played right around a half a game and had 23 pass attempts. And it's also not always fair to just throw a quarterback into a game, which, first of all, it was a Thursday night game, so there's only 3 days of prep. He gets thrown in the middle of a game, in the middle of a tight game against a decent Bengals team. So it's not like Bridgewater was thrown into the best spot to prepare. And something that I read into from a narrative perspective, not that it would totally make me change my idea of the game, but Mike McDaniel did say in press conferences this week that nothing changed with Teddy Bridgewater quarterback. All of the game plan remains the same. So all of the passing volume we saw from Tua before, I think we're going to see from Teddy Bridgewater. And just given his price point, I could see that being a lot of upside because we've seen the Dolphins churn out some massive high-scoring games where Tua put up a lot of fantasy points prior to him getting hurt. I think Bridgewater has some of that same upside.
Yeah, Bridgewater was actually on my list and I skipped over him. Definitely interesting. I think Teddy Bridgewater is one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league. And I think he can step in and fill in for Tua pretty admirably. The Jets 29th in terms of pass DVOA. So it's just a great spot for Teddy Bridgewater. Obviously the weapons are elite and I'm on the same page. I think that both Hill and Waddle are going to play this week. So yeah, sign me up for some Teddy Bridgewater as well. And then just one other quarterback I wanted to throw in there who's kind of in that mid-range, but Matthew Stafford is kind of interesting against the Cowboys. The Rams have a 23.75 implied team total. Obviously Cooper Kupp, we're going to want to play some, so you can just throw in Matthew Stafford into some stacks with Kupp.
Yeah, I see it the exact same way there when it comes to Stafford. He's played as poor as he could possibly play, but as a result, his price is down and nobody's playing him this week. It's everybody's kind of jumped off board. We've got him projected for 2% ownership over on DraftKings. The FanDuel ownership for him, I believe, was somewhere around the same. 4%. So he's a low-owned QB. We know he has the pass catchers, particularly Cooper Kupp, to be able to generate that upside, even if he doesn't do that much himself. Think like Jimmy Garoppolo the other day in the primetime game. He throws a slant route to Deebo Samuel. Samuel breaks like 6 tackles, scores a touchdown. Did Jimmy Garoppolo really do anything on the play? No, he actually kind of threw a shitty pass, but he still gets the fantasy points all the same. So just mostly because of the talent of Cooper Kupp, I think that creates a lot of the upside for Stafford, and he does look a little bit under-owned for us. Anything else you want to bring up at quarterback?
No, I think we covered him pretty well.
Okay, guys, if you haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you want to try out any of the tools that Neil and I are talking about and stuff that's really valuable, projections, obviously, but in addition, ownership projections, the boom bust tool showing in our simulations the odds of each player to be optimal on each slate, you could get free access to our tools if you haven't signed up yet. 3-day free trials available for all new members. And then if you like it after trying it out, you could sign up using the promo code NFL Strategy Show and that'll get you 50% off, or sorry, NFL strategy, no show at the end, just NFL strategy, and that'll get you 50% off your first week of Stokastic Plus Platinum package. And that doesn't just cover football, also covers basically every DFS sport out there. So basketball starting up soon, baseball playoffs ongoing. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Stokastic Plus today. Let's move on over to the running backs. And the most popular running back this week on both FanDuel and DraftKings is Leonard Fournette. And I think it's warranted. I love the matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. And even if Fournette hasn't been all that efficient running the football this year, it's not preventing him from getting touches in a lot of these spots. The Buccaneers have not really shown too much of an issue to give him a big workload. Maybe a little bit of concern that Rachaad White is starting to get into the mix, but Fournette is only $6,900 over on DraftKings. FanDuel is $7,800. I like the matchup. I think this is going to be a big breakout game for Leonard Fournette. Are you willing to ride with the chalk at running back here?
Yeah, this feels like a spot where people, some sharp players are going to say, what, people played Leonard Fournette way too much at 61% owned, and then he's going to put up 3 touchdowns, and it's all going to be warranted. He played, as I said, 61% of snaps. I think I said he was 61% owned. No, 61% of snaps in week 4. So season low for Leonard Fournette in terms of snap count in week 4. Obviously, Rachaad White was way more involved in week 4. So there is a little bit of cause for concern there. But yeah, I just think that Leonard Fournette is still the workhorse for the Bucs. I think that he's still likely to get the lion's share of the workload going forward. The Bucs have a 28.25 implied team total. The Falcons are 26 against the rush. And Leonard Fournette is not really getting a crazy amount of ownership. We have projected for 18.6% ownership. I think I'm willing to eat about that amount of Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, and by the way, we got a question in the chat from WW, and I wanted to bring it up here because he had said, do you guys like stacking a running back with their QB? So for me, it depends. It depends if the running back is a pass catch or not. Leonard Fournette is, and he's gotten a lot of work in the passing game. So I don't mind having Fournette in lineups that also have Tom Brady. But in the past, Derrick Henry's been a running back that I wouldn't stack with Ryan Tannehill, for instance, because historically, Henry, a player who's been very involved in the run game, but not as much in the passing game. So it kind of depends. Like Austin Eckler, if you guys like Justin Herbert this week, Eckler gets a lot of passing game work. He kind of functions as a wide receiver / pass catcher as well. It has to be a running back for me, at least. I know other people might do it differently, but if it's a pass catching running back, yeah, I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah, for sure. I like pairing a quarterback with a pass catching running back. I don't intentionally pair quarterbacks with non-pass catching running backs, but I also don't disallow it. I think that there is maybe a little bit of positive correlation with quarterbacks and non-pass catching running backs, just because the team is likely to put up a lot of points, but it's not something that I force. I am more likely to, include my running backs in the stacks if they are pass catching options who have a shot at, catching a touchdown through the air.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much the same way. I won't necessarily make rules against it, but I do have certain settings that I use to boost running backs that catch passes with quarterbacks that I wouldn't do otherwise. So like I mentioned Derrick Henry before. If I have him in the same lineup with Ryan Tannehill, I'm not going to say, oh no, I can't play it, but I'm also not using him as the specific pass catcher in my stacks. If that all follows and makes sense.
Yep, exactly right. That's exactly how I play it.
All right, let's talk about the most positively leveraged running back that we have this weekend, and that is Alvin Kamara. And I know that people are going to get a little uncomfortable with Kamara. He's picking up some ownership this weekend. Not anything crazy, but it's been a disappointing year for Kamara without a doubt. But he's now $6,600 on DraftKings. He's $7,000 over on FanDuel. And a couple of years ago, if Kamara was at this price, he'd be 30-40% owned. Are you willing to buy the dip on Alvin Kamara? It has not been the greatest start to the year. And Andy Dalton's a quarterback.
And we just saw Jamal Williams tear up the Seahawks defense. I mean, it's a bad defense. And Alvin Kamara is a lot more talented. I think I'm safe to say he's more talented than Jamal Williams. Yeah, the price is right. The matchup is phenomenal. At 6,600. The Saints have a 25.25 implied team total. Kamara does it through the air. He does it on the ground. The Saints are missing. I don't know that it helps him that the Saints are missing both Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas necessarily, because they might have trouble moving the ball. But I think against the Seahawks, they should be able to move the ball anyway. So yeah, I like Kamara quite a bit this week.
Yeah, and so the matchup certainly plays in his favor. Here's actually where I kind of do think it helps that Winston is out. Winston has not really targeted Kamara a ton in the passing game. Does it mean Andy Dalton is going to? No, it doesn't mean that Andy Dalton has to. But if you were to ask me who's going to target Alvin Kamara more, Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton, I would guess Andy Dalton, just because I already know that Winston doesn't really do it. So I think that it could be a benefit to Kamara, and then Michael Thomas also being out of the mix could also help them. So the offense right here for the Saints is not going to be good overall. No Michael Thomas, no Jameis Winston. But how good should we have expected the Lions offense to be last week without Amon-Ra, St. Brown, and without DeAndre Swift in the mix? The Seahawks just might have a defense that can't stop anybody. And who's most likely to score touchdowns and be productive from the Saints? That's Alvin Kamara. His price is as cheap as we're ever going to see it. The matchup is really good. I like buying low on Kamara as well. He's one of my favorite tournament plays of the entire week. Who else are you looking at in large field tournaments as somebody you really want to build lineups around?
Dalvin Cook definitely interests me against this Bears defense. That 7,300 price tag is pretty low for Dalvin Cook. The Vikings have a 25.75 implied team total. The Bears are 24th against the run in terms of rush DVOA. So great spot, great matchup for Dalvin Cook, great price tag for Dalvin Cook. He actually has slight negative leverage in our tools, but I think that's a spot where I'm willing to eat it anyway. I'm probably going to be with or maybe even above the field on Cook just because I believe in the talent. I like the price tag. I love the matchup. So there's just so much for me to like about Dalvin Cook. Certainly going to go there a fair amount. I'll say Alex really liked Christian McCaffrey, brought him up as a contrarian play that he likes. It's really hard for me to like Christian McCaffrey that much against San Francisco, but usually when my instincts go against Alex, I'm wrong, and he's going to get so much volume that they're going to put up points. So you should at least consider Christian McCaffrey on Alex's recommendation, not because he's likely to succeed, but he's likelier to succeed than he is going to be owned at only 5.2% ownership. He gets the most usage of any running back in the league. So I think Christian McCaffrey is an interesting play, even in this matchup, and even at an $8,500 price tag. Outside of those guys, I kind of like James Robinson again in this matchup with the Texans. It's just one of the few spots where Jacksonville. Actually, maybe that's not true anymore. Maybe Jacksonville is good enough that they will be favored in a number of spots this year, but they are favored a good amount on the Texans. James Robinson at 6,300 in a game script where they should be, running out the clock, 5.5% ownership. I've been fading him all year, and I think that this is the spot where I finally jump onto the James Robinson train. So maybe you should jump off because I've been wrong all year. So maybe I'm going to be wrong again, but I think I'm willing to play some James Robinson this weekend. I think we have to talk about Devin Singletary just because the Bills should be in a spot where they want to run the ball against the Steelers. They have a 14-point spread there. Should be a blowout. So maybe they run the ball a little bit more. Singletary is getting 10% ownership though. So he looks, he has some negative leverage in the tools, but at least an interesting play. I can see why people want to play Devin Singletary. Kareem Hunt is a player that interests me at 1.6% ownership. I think I say it every week. Three of the players that I mention every week are Kareem Hunt and then both of the Patriots backs. It's just like every week they look like they're so low owned, and I feel like all of them are going to have spike weeks throughout the year. So Kareem Hunt is somebody that I think that I need to mention at 1.6% projected ownership against the Chargers defense that has been pretty bad at times this year. So Kareem Hunt interests me. And then of course, that matchup with the Lions is just so great for Ramondre Stevenson and Damien Harris. They're getting ownership, but I think it's warranted. I'm going to be playing some of each. My preference overall is going to be Ramondre Stevenson. He's more involved in the pass game. He saw more of the Patriots snaps. He played 55% of Patriots snaps last week. So I think I prefer Ramondre Stevenson, but honestly, it kind of comes down to where the ownership shakes out. If Stevenson is getting a lot more ownership than Harris come Sunday, maybe I'll flip that and play more Harris, but they both interest me. I should say with Tony Pollard questionable, we have to mention that Zeke will become very interesting if Tony Pollard is out. He's questionable with an illness. Those are the main guys. Jeff Wilson Jr. looks pretty good at 5,500 against this Panthers defense, middling defense, 5,500. He's been very involved for the Niners. So the price is right for Jeff Wilson. Breece Hall, you can consider as a run back in some Dolphin stacks, maybe as a one-off here or there. Not my favorite play on the slate, but the Jets do have a 21 point implied team total. Breece Hall has been very involved. The price is right. And then a lot of people are going to want to go to Raheem Mostert. I get it against the Jets defense. The Dolphins should be able to put up points. He appears to be the RB1 and he's only 5,000. So I'll probably play some Raheem Mostert. We'll see how much the field actually gets there.
Yeah, and then I think one other running back that we should be talking about, by the way, of the guys you mentioned, Jeff do you need to help your dog out with something?
My wife is out there. I don't know what he's barking at. I was wondering if you could hear him.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. I was just like, is your dog okay? Is there an issue over there? But Jeff Wilson, I totally agree with. The workload has been there. He's somebody I got to quite a bit in the mid-range. Actually, the mid-range running back I got the most exposure to in my initial run. I'm a little concerned about the ownership going to Damien Pierce. He's played a massive role as of late for the Texans. And in terms of game script now, he's even getting the targets, which that was a Rex Burkhead thing earlier in the year. But last week against the Chargers, even with them losing, we saw 14 carries go to Damien Pierce. And then he was targeted 6 times in the passing game. But we right now have him fairly negatively leveraged, 15% ownership on DK, 6% chance to be optimal. Over on FanDuel, he is at 10% ownership, 5% chance to be optimal. So not quite as popular on FanDuel, but still picking up negative leverage. Let me see where we have Rex Burkhead. Yeah, we don't really have any significant projection on Rex Burkhead. So this is even with us expecting most of the workload to go to Damien Pierce. What are you going to do with him when it's a running back that a lot of people are high on coming into the year? His workload appears to be on the uptick, but the ownership is catching up as well. What are you going to do with him in large field tournaments?
I think Damien Pierce is going to be largely a fade for me, assuming this ownership stays where it is. I just like so many different running backs in this kind of price range and even cheaper that it's hard for me to want to play Damien Pierce at 15.4% ownership. I'd just rather go elsewhere. And the Jags do have a pretty good defense as well. So it's just really hard for me to want to play a ton of Damien Pierce. Somebody just brought up in chat, Derrick Henry. Yeah, Derrick Henry looks pretty interesting against the Commanders. Not a great 30th in terms of pass DVOA, 6th in terms of rush DVOA. So it's not a great rushing spot for Henry, but as long as the Titans can move the ball, I think, Derrick Henry is always live to score the touchdown. So Derrick Henry, always pretty interesting, even at 8,200. So I think that Derrick Henry certainly in play. He's just not like one way or the other. He's not a play that I feel the need to go too much above or below the field on Derrick Henry. And then Austin Eckler, I guess we should mention, is facing the Browns. The Browns are 30th in terms of rush DVOA. Austin Eckler looking a little bit over-owned in our tools at 10.2% projected ownership, 7% chance of booming, 6.8% chance of being optimal. So a little bit of negative leverage on Austin Eckler. But of course, I faded him the other week in a similar spot where he was just coming in over-owned. And of course, he crushed. So we should at least mention him as somebody that you can consider playing.
The running backs I got to the most overall in the initial build I did were Leonard Fournette, Jeff Wilson, Alvin Kamara, and Dalvin Cook. It's funny with Derrick Henry because we talk about Derrick Henry when he's 5% owned and he's cheaper than this. People are like, he's the worst play ever, Derrick Henry. And then he has a couple good games, he gets more expensive and more popular. And people are like, should we play Derrick Henry now? I'm with you. I don't have a strong feeling pro or against Derrick Henry. In the build I did, I came very close to the field on him. He's 12% owned. He's 11% owned. I got to him in 12% of the lineups I built. So I'd be fairly neutral to him right now. The guys, like I said before, that I did like getting to more: Leonard Fournette, Jeff Wilson, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook. That looks like more of the core for me at running back as of now. Any other talking points for you at the position? If not, we will move on over to the wideouts.
Yeah, I think we've largely covered all of the running backs.
All right. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks. And if you guys haven't signed up at Prize Picks yet, here's why you should do it. And here's why you should click on the link below in the description box when you do sign up. Because when you click on that link, you can get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit. And that's much better than getting no bonus deposit when you sign up over at Prize Picks. So you click on that link and sign up, help build that bankroll over there. And then we've got a lot of projections over at Stokastic.com, particularly on Odd Chopper, that are going to help you find the best props to put into your prop cards over on Prize Picks. So stuff like over on Odd Chopper, we've got the prop odds, projected odds of going over or under, just a really simple way to find odds where are the best projections on overs or under for odds to help build out those prop cards over on Prize Picks. Just when you sign up, make sure to click that link below and get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit. Let's head on over to the wide receivers. And right off the bat, the player I got the most exposure to at any position when I was building my lineups this weekend was Chris Godwin. And I know that there's been all kinds of uncertainty with his health so far this year. Some people question him coming back too quickly from the torn ACL injury, which it's hard to argue against that because he immediately got hurt in the first game of the season when he played. But last week against the Chiefs, 10 targets, caught seven of them for 59 yards. So it's not like he had some kind of crazy high upside fantasy game, but the matchup is great against the Falcons. Godwin is considerably cheaper than where he was last year. For instance, the final game Godwin played before he got hurt, he was $7,600. This week on DraftKings, $5,900. Also cheaper on FanDuel this week than he was last year before getting hurt. I think Godwin, based on his target share last week, is pretty close to full health. I love the matchup. I think this might be the cheapest Chris Godwin is priced at for the rest of the season. I'm going to be playing a lot of him.
Yeah, I mean, the price tag is just way wrong on Chris Godwin. He should not be a $5,900 receiver. He's a back end wide receiver 1 in season long leagues. I think Chris Godwin looks phenomenal at 5,900. As you said, one of the best matchups you can have against the Falcons. They just give up points in a lot of different ways. The Buccaneers have a 28.25 implied team total. Chris Godwin is very active in the passing game for the Bucs. So there's just so much to like about Chris Godwin this week. I'm with you. I'm probably going to be above the field. We have positive leverage, on Chris Godwin. Project for 15.2% ownership, 20.3% chance of being optimal, 19% chance of booming. There's just not much to dislike about Chris Godwin as long as he's coming in this low owned. So I'm totally with you. I got to say, I thought for sure when you started, the first player you want to talk about, the player who's going to be in all your lineups is going to be Cooper Kupp. You're a man of mystery, Greg. I guess it shouldn't have surprised me because Chris Godwin is such a clear slam dunk, but I thought you were just going to be like, yeah, just play Cooper Kupp every week.
Yeah, well, that is going to be my next talking point. So I was going to talk about paying up at wide receiver. And it's just so hard for me to justify paying up for anybody with regularity who isn't Cooper Kupp. The thing is just Godwin ended up being my most rostered player because he's $7,000 over on FanDuel. DraftKings, he's $5,900. And even though he's picking up ownership on both sites, we still have him being as one of the most positive leverage players on the slate. So I think this is very good chalk on Chris Godwin. As far as Cooper Kupp goes, I don't even know what else we could say that we haven't said about him the last couple of years. And there isn't that much interesting analysis to do on Cooper Kupp because he's tremendous. Basically every single game he plays this year, his fantasy point totals per game, 35, 36, 16, 29. The target share, 14 targets, 15 targets, 6 targets, 19 targets. Matthew Stafford just hones in on this guy. And there's not even real reason to throw to other guys because he makes stuff happen every time throw him the football. He's really expensive on FanDuel or DraftKings, but he's such a high floor and such a high ceiling. I don't even think they could give him a fair price tag because the fair price tag for Cooper Kupp would be like, all right, 12,000, and then he just wouldn't fit into lineups. So just because of how good he is, just play him. I'm overweight to Cooper Kupp every single slate the Rams are on.
It's one of those rare spots in the NFL where the player is extremely talented and the team knows that he's extremely talented. You see so many spots where it's like, this guy has so much talent and the team is just not using him. But Cooper Kupp, the Rams recognize his talent and throw him the ball every time. So yeah, I'm with you on Cooper Kupp. There's not really much more you need to say. He is the likeliest receiver of anybody to put up a huge score. His ownership coming in at 17.4% is reasonable. That's about where it should be. We have him optimal 16.4%. We have him booming 19.5%. So yeah, it's hard not to love Cooper Kupp. Basically any slate. The Cowboys are 5th in the league in terms of pass DVOA, the Cowboys defense. So it's not the best spot for Cooper Kupp. The Rams have a 23.75 implied total, not the highest on the board, but he's just so involved. It's hard not to like him. And we see him get there even without scoring touchdowns. He just gets there through PPR volume, especially on DraftKings. The floor is just so high. And then obviously the ceiling is there as well. So gotta love Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I totally think of Cooper Kupp same way. It's just as safe as a player gets. And, we've got some interesting comments in the chat right now and very relevant talking point right now from Jeffrey Battaglia, who's saying that Burks is now on the IR. Totally true. We just saw that recently. Treylon Burks officially on the injured list, injured reserve, wasn't expected to play this weekend. I think Kyle Phillips now makes for a really good cost-saving option. And let's see what the ownership looks like tomorrow. But at least as of right now, he's projected for 1% ownership over on DK at $3,900. And then over on FanDuel, he is right now projected for less than 1% ownership at $5,200. If people are not going to play Kyle Phillips, we've seen him draw targets from Ryan Tannehill this year. Now Burks is out of the picture, who I think of as the most talented Titans wide receiver. He certainly stands to gain a lot of target share now, and he's so cheap. I think it's a very good value play.
I'm on the same page as you. I get the benefit of doing on the contrary with Alex on Friday. And Kyle Phillips was a guy that he said, he's averaging like 2.3 fantasy points per game so far this year. So a lot of people aren't even going to think of the name Kyle Phillips, but he is in a great spot here with Treylon Burks on the IR at 3,900. I expect him to be very, very involved. And if he's only going to be 1% owned, I'm going to be way over the field on Kyle Phillips. We have him in the optimal 6.6% of the time. My guess is I'll have more than 6.6% of Kyle Phillips just due to that positive leverage on the 1% ownership. The ownership could come up. We have to recognize that maybe more people recognize the spot as we get closer to lock, but I think that he's a pretty clear great play at 3,900. And then Spags through the Nick Westbrook-Akine in there as well. After Alex brought up Phillips, Spags brought up, you could also go the other way and go Nick Westbrook-Akine at even lower ownership, 0.5% projected ownership. We have him with positive leverage as well, so I think that's a decent spot. And then of course Robert Woods benefits as well with Treylon Burks out, projected for 4.8% ownership, optimal 8.8% of the time. So all of these Tennessee wide receivers look pretty interesting. And I mentioned earlier that I like Ryan Tannehill. It's just a game environment that both defenses are terrible against the pass. So it could be a big shootout here. So yeah, I'm going to be in on these Tennessee wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes a whole lot of sense. I'm interested to see what the ownership looks like come tomorrow, once maybe there's another run and there's more updates going with more people getting the news that Burks isn't playing. Because once again, he was put on the injured reserve, like 20 minutes ago or something. It was fairly recent. So that could definitely change what some of the ownership looks like. I want to ask you about the other high-end wide receivers. To me, if I'm paying up for somebody, like I said, it's going to be Cooper Kupp. We do have Stephon Diggs picking up ownership this week. Deebo Samuel is north of 20% owned. Just because of my overall interest in Kupp, I do think it's going to make it a little harder for me to get to some of these other wide receivers. I would like to say, hey, I'm playing a wide receiver this week, Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, and Stephon Diggs, but it's hard to do that because of salary restrictions. Between Samuel and Diggs, how do they stack up for you relative to Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, I mean, they're both in. Sorry, I was looking up stats on Justin Jefferson, and you weren't even asking me about Justin Jefferson, because I think that Justin Jefferson is kind of interesting in this matchup with the Bears. I was just looking at, man, I didn't even bring up Kirk Cousins, my own quarterback, the Vikings quarterback, and he looks good in the tools, projected for only 3.8% ownership, and the Vikings have a 5.8% chance of being the top stack on the board. So got to throw Justin Jefferson in there and then bring it back and say, hey, maybe we can play some Kirk Cousins as well. But yeah, Diggs looks like one of the more positively leveraged wide receivers on the slate, 12.9% projected ownership, 16.6% optimal, 16% boom. They have the highest implied team total on the slate. The concern obviously is that they might be running the ball out in the fourth quarter. They might not be throwing it a whole lot, but Diggs obviously, he's the alpha for the Bills. We'd expect him to put up a big game in a game where the Bills have a 29.75 implied team total. Certainly, Diggs is interesting. And then was it Deebo that you brought up second?
Yeah, I was just rattling off the highly owned, expensive wide receivers today. Where for this weekend, where we've got the most popular actually isn't even Cooper Kupp. Stephon Diggs is picking up more ownership than Kupp, and then we've also got Deebo Samuel, not all that far behind either in terms of projected ownership. So I think if I'm paying up, I just have to prioritize Kupp. And by the way, Tyreek Hill also really popular this weekend. But I was saying that I think just because of my overall interest in Kupp, it's going to make it hard for me to get to as much of the field on some of those other guys. Not because they project poorly points per dollar, but just I think Kupp is a superior option.
Yeah, so I've got Kupp at 17.4% ownership and Diggs at 12.9. So I think I don't know if this is I just refreshed and maybe it's just
I might be looking at an older ownership projection.
You might be looking at FanDuel too. I don't know. Anyway, I think that Diggs looks great. I think that I'm going to get to a fair amount of Diggs most likely. But yeah, as you say, Cooper Kupp is just so phenomenal. Any slate that he plays on, he can put up 40 fantasy points. So Cooper Kupp, always very interesting. And then Tyreek Hill, I mean, always interesting. Jalen Waddle is questionable, but I think likely to play. So I don't think we factored that in that much. But you and I both said that we like some Teddy Bridgewater stacks. And obviously Tyreek Hill is going to be a big part of those Teddy Bridgewater stacks. Tyreek has a little bit of negative leverage, but I don't care that much. If I get to 2 or even above the field on Tyreek Hill, I'm not going to be cutting back because of the negative leverage. I think he's, close enough to neutral and such a great player. You can always put up a huge game. So I'm willing to eat the chalk on Tyreek Hill. I don't know if I will, just because there are other wide receivers who are kind of interesting who are going to get virtually no ownership. So I might get more of those guys, and maybe that gets me off of Hill a little bit. But if I do end up where the field is on Tyreek Hill, obviously 16% is about where it should be on Tyreek Hill at 8,000.
Yeah, so right now, relative to ownership, price point, my favorite value play at wideout is Kyle Phillips. But if I was going to target a different value play that I also think stands out at really low ownership, Rondale Moore is interesting to me. So I do have a bet on him also. I bet him over 3.5 receptions, fairly low number, but there's still no DeAndre Hopkins for Arizona. AJ Green got hurt last week. And you just kind of look at this wide receiver core and say, like, all right, where are the targets going to? When you consider the matchup against Philadelphia, is probably going to dictate that the Cardinals have to throw the ball in the fourth quarter. Rondale Moore has a lot of upside. He has a lot of talent. He has a lot of speed. He also has the possibility to take a screen pass and bring it, 40 yards for a touchdown or something like that just because of his athleticism. If he's going to remain low owned around the single digit mark, I think he's a pretty good salary saving play just based on where else are the targets really going to go to for Arizona in a game where they're going to probably have to throw the football.
Yeah, Rondo Moore is interested. 7.9% projected ownership, 10.9% optimal. As you say, in a great, not a great matchup in that the Eagles defense is actually pretty good, but great in the sense that, as you say, they're going to need to be throwing the ball a lot. So yeah, Rondo Moore, certainly interesting at 4,100. He'll be a big part of my lineups. I'm with you there. I think we also have to talk about Isaiah McKenzie as somebody who's pretty interesting at 5,000 in a matchup where the Bills are expected to put up a ton of points. I'm going to have some Isaiah McKenzie. We only have projected for 4% ownership, 10% optimal. So one of the more positively leveraged wide receivers as well. I don't know, not quite as cheap as Rondale Moore, not quite in that value range that you're talking about, but just a little bit more expensive. I have some interest in Isaiah McKenzie as well.
Yeah, Mckenzie also projects out really well for us, especially when you consider that you and I at the top of the show were talking about, well, Josh Allen is the quarterback that seems to make the most sense in our data. Bills have really high top stack odds. Josh Allen positively leveraged in terms of our boom bust tool. And then you start to figure out, well, he's expensive. How are we going to save salary with him? Well, Isaiah McKenzie is one of the ways that I think makes sense across both DraftKings and FanDuel at a reasonably cheap price point, and also not really all that popular. 4% owned over on DK, 3.7% on FanDuel. So those are definitely ownership numbers that I think make sense. Lower the ownership of Bill stacks while also saving some salary. Any other wide receivers that you think are going to be important to you this weekend that we haven't talked about?
I think I'll have a fair amount of Christian Kirk. Talked about how I like Trevor Lawrence. Christian Kirk, the obvious wide receiver to pair with him. Drake London, we mentioned as an obvious bring back if you're doing some buck stacks. Chris Olave looks interesting, looks a little bit negative leverage in the tools, but we really like Alvin Kamara. The matchup is also great for New Orleans wide receivers against the Seahawks. So 5,700 Chris Olave with Michael Thomas out is clearly the wide receiver one for New Orleans. So assuming they're going to be able to move on Seattle, I think Olave is somebody I'm going to have some interest in. I think those are the biggest ones that I wanted to talk about, along with those Tennessee guys. Adam Thielen, I mentioned that I really like Justin Jefferson. Adam Thielen, pretty interesting as well at 2.5% projected ownership, 7.3% optimal. He has some massive positive leverage. Oh, and I guess I mentioned Chris Olave. Got to mention Jarvis Landry. I think the latest is that he's questionable. Maybe I should double check that, but we have him at 3% projected ownership right now. Also a great matchup for Landry. Let me double check just to make sure he's questionable. Didn't practice yesterday. So maybe Jarvis Landry won't be in play. If Jarvis Landry ends up playing, I'm going to have some interest. I'll play some Jarvis Landry at minimal ownership. I think those are, I guess New England, we have to mention, I think Jacoby Myers is questionable in that matchup with the Lions. Not the best spot with Bailey Zappi at quarterback. We didn't even talk about Bailey Zappi because we have him over-owned. It is about as good of a spot as you can ask for, though. So maybe take a shot here or there with some New England receivers as well. I think that about does it.
Yeah.
Anybody else for you?
I saw, So Jacoby Myers, by the way, is expected to play tomorrow. Missed last week's game, has been injured, but is expected back next week. I also got distracted because there was the ice cream music playing. Ice cream truck just went by my house. It's like 50 degrees outside. It's a little past that, I think, for them to be doing business. But no, everything you said there, I agree with. I was getting to some exposure of Chris Olave. I do prefer Alvin Kamara, though, which I think is going to ultimately definitely nerf the amount of Olave I get just from this standpoint. I don't want to play a whole lot of Andy Dalton. And I also don't really build lineups that have running backs and wide receivers from the same team unless they either have the quarterback or the opposing quarterback in the lineup. And if I have to make the choice between Kamara and Olave, it's just going to end up being Kamara for me on this slate. So Olave is fairly popular. It looks like I'm going to be underweight to field to him just for that reason. But individually, I think he's not a bad play. It's just he's not going to fit in with how I'm going to be structuring my lineups. Yeah,
that makes sense. I think that I'll probably get to more than you will, but I understand what you're saying. And yeah, Kamara obviously looks great. We didn't mention Amon-Ra St. Brown, sort of interesting at 3% ownership. Ramon-Ra just has that upside potential any given week. And then I talked about how much I like Jalen Hurts. Obviously, I'll play some AJ Brown. He has some negative leverage. Devontae Smith is also coming in at just 5.5% projected ownership in this matchup with Arizona. I'll have some interest there. And then I said I like Kyler Murray somewhat. I'll play some Marquise Brown, as you said, Rondale Moore in that matchup as well. Just a few more interesting names that I see here.
All right, let's move on over to tight end. And I have a guy that's popping up in a lot of my lineups right now at tight end. And not one that I would have expected. Maybe I would have expected if I really thought about it before. But Cade Otton is ending up in a lot of my lineups. And it's twofold. Number one, it's the price point. He's only $2,500. There's no break this weekend for the Buccaneers. He's out. And then also, we just don't have the studs available to us at tight end this weekend. The most expensive tight end over on DraftKings is George Kittle, and he's been fairly miserable so far this year. The most expensive tight end over on FanDuel is TJ Hawkinson, and I don't want to chase TJ Hawkinson. He's priced all the way up to $7,000 on FanDuel, and is coming off what's in all likelihood going to be the best game of his life. So when I'm building lineups out, and this is also a position that I just like saving salary at when we don't have the best studs to play at the position, 4% ownership for Otton over on FanDuel. On DK, we right now have him projected for 5% ownership. I like the salary savings. It opens up a lot for me at other positions. There's a clear void to fill at tight end right now for the Buccaneers. How much do you like him as a potential value option?
Yeah, definitely an interesting value option. I don't really know much about Cade Otton in terms of talent, if I'm being honest, but the price is right. The matchup is great with the Falcons. Maybe a way to get different in some of those Tom Brady stacks if you want to play some Tom Brady. So yeah, Cade Otton is interesting to me. I don't know that I'm going to be like jamming him in if he's already at 5.6% ownership. He's a play that I would love at 2% ownership. If the field is getting there a good amount, I don't love him quite as much, but he's still certainly going to be in my player pool. Not a guy that I'm fading just because of 5.6% ownership. Tom Brady, has had a lot of success throwing to tight ends throughout his career, and Cade Otton is 2,500. So definitely some interest there for me as well. Tight end is pretty, there's no like real standouts for me. I'm going to be playing a lot of tight ends, I think, this week, which is true a lot of weeks.
Yeah, so in terms of where the field is going, and by the way, ownership super spread out at tight end this week. We've got on FanDuel 2 tight ends projected for double-digit ownership, Tyler Higbee and Dallas Goedert. Over on DK, only Tyler Higbee. Higbee is like double the ownership of any other tight end on the slate. I understand why people are getting to him. He's $4,300. The target share has been there. I do think that double stacks, Stafford, Higbee, Kupp are very sensible. That's where basically all of Stafford's targets have gone so far this year. He's thrown the ball a lot also. It's just only going to those 2 guys by and large part. So I get why people are getting to Higbee. It's just the ownership is about fair to me. When I was running my lineups before I got to 15% of Tyler Higbee, well, he's 14% owned on DraftKings, 13% on FanDuel. So I just think the ownership's about fair.
Yeah, the ownership is about fair. We should mention him because he does have the highest odds of being optimal of any tight end on the slate. He looks great at 4,300. The field recognizes that. So fairly neutral play, but in a cash game setting, I think Tyler Higbee is probably the first tight end you go to. And he'll be a big part of my lineups as well. I don't know that I'm going to be above the field necessarily. I haven't built my lineups yet. I might be. He might end up in a lot of lineups, but at 14% ownership, he's about where he should be. We actually have some positive leverage. Even at 14.2% ownership, we have him optimal 15.9% of the time, booming 17.2% of the time. He's just so involved in that offense, and the price tag is right. So I do have some interest in Tyler Higbee. Talks about how much I like Jalen Hurts in this matchup with the Cardinals. Dallas Goedert is going to benefit from that. 9.6% ownership, optimal 14.9% of the time, booming 13.7% of the time. So Dallas Goedert, massive positive leverage there. And then Gerald Everett, 4,200, 3.8% projected ownership. He booms 12.7% of the time. Gerald Everett looks great. I'll play some Njoku. Who else is interesting here? Zach Ertz. I'll have in some of those Kyler stacks. I'll probably have some Zach Ertz interest. You mentioned Cade Otton. We also have Dawson Knox out. So Quentin Morris becomes maybe interesting for the Bills as their tight end, presumed tight end 1. I don't know if Tommy Sweeney is going to be involved. Something to watch. And then Juwan Johnson, is the Saints' number 1 tight end in a matchup with Seattle. Becomes sort of interest. I might play a little bit of Juwan Johnson as well.
The lineups I built, I'm looking at them right now. It's kind of hilarious because I get to some Higbee, like I mentioned before, Cade Otton, my most roster tight end. And then it's just so many guys around like 4 or 5% ownership. There is one guy, though, that I think if we're just looking at the talent on the slate and we're trying to find the most upside relative to ownership, I think the answer has to be George Kittle. He's 1% owned on DraftKings, 2% owned on FanDuel. I get it. He's been used more as a blocker this year. The targets haven't really been there. And then something else that's kind of a concern is that Jimmy Garoppolo playing at quarterback. And, is Jimmy Garoppolo somebody who's going to be great? Well, the 49ers certainly don't think so because they tried to trade him more than able to, and they started somebody else at quarterback to start the year. But we know Kittle's one of the most talented tight ends in the league. And just at this kind of ownership, it makes sense to me. Like I said, 2% on FanDuel, 1% on DraftKings. It doesn't take much to get overweight to George Kittle. That's the really low-owned tight end that I like taking stabs on.
I really like that call. He is, as you said, the most expensive tight end on the slate, and he has not been successful so far this year. So people are just writing him off. I can't play George Kittle, but the 49ers know how talented he is. It wouldn't be that shocking if they decide this game, we're going to get Kittle more involved, throw him more passes. He also had a touchdown in the last game that he missed by like inches stepping out of bounds. So it's not like they're not using George Kittle in the red zone. I like that call out for sure. Tyler Conklin was brought up in the chat. Yeah, I mean, the Dolphins 31st in terms of pass DVOA. The Jets are expected to put up 21 implied team total. And Tyler Conklin has been extremely involved for the Jets so far this year. So I like that call. I'll probably have some Tyler Conklin exposure in my lineups. I thought there was another tight end somewhere that I was going to mention. I can't remember who it was, though.
Oh, good. But it's time for the best part of the show, Neil. It's when we finish and we give out our favorite stack of the entire week. If you guys haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Now, Neil, if you're only building one NFL lineup this weekend and playing in a large field tournament, what is the stack that you would go towards?
That is an excellent question.
I have my answer if you want me to give mine first.
Yeah, give yours first.
All right. So individually, I talked about Tom Brady does look over-owned individually as a quarterback by our top stacks tool, boom bust tool, but I like his pass catchers and some of the run back options so much on a points per dollar basis that I still end up getting to a lot of Tom Brady. So the stack that I got to most often in the lineups I built, and I definitely think it makes a whole lot of sense, Brady at quarterback, Godwin at wide receiver, K. Dotton at tight end, and then Drake London as a run back option. No Kyle Pitts in the mix this weekend for the Falcons. That's my stack, and it's one that it looks like I'm going to be playing quite a bit. Did you figure out the one that you're landing on?
Yeah, so I'm tempted to say my Vikings and just be a homer because I didn't even bring it up when I was talking about quarterbacks for Cousins, but more and more I'm like, this is kind of interesting against the Bears. I might play some Viking stacks, but I'm going to go back to that Philadelphia stack. I really like Jalen Hurts on DraftKings in particular at 8.9% projected ownership. I'll probably pair him with Goddard and maybe Devontae Smith. I mean, AJ Brown is the obvious one, but I think he's going to be paired more often with AJ Brown. I think that I am actually going to be doing some double stacks though with Jalen Hurts this weekend. So I think I'll probably go there and I'll do a mixture of AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. Maybe I'll throw Miles Sanders in some. I don't know, but I think Hurts is interesting this weekend.
All right. So that is going to do it for us. Guys, if you're not done yet, do us a favor. Like I said before, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, watch our big football show tomorrow. We've got the Live Before Lock show. It runs for like 18 hours in a row. It never ends. It goes on and on, but it's tremendous content. So check that out while you're building your lineups tomorrow. Other than that, enjoy all the football games tomorrow and good luck this weekend.